The open ocean can be a terrifying place. Miles from shore on storm-tossed seas with nothing but water in all directions, including straight down, a sailor or fisherman cannot help but wonder what lurks in the depths. When the oceans were still unexplored, these fears often took the form of imaginary monsters. Many sea monsters include features from living animals. A large tentacle becomes part of a monstrous sea serpent or many-armed kraken. The eye sees a fragment, the mind fills in the rest. A blend of tall tales, mistaken identity, and resonant cultural symbols, stories of sea monsters often reveal more about the minds of the imaginers than they do about the natural world. A sea monster is, by definition, any creature that comes from the sea, real or mythical, and is usually large or threatening. There are hundreds of accounts of these creatures. Any culture that had contact with the sea has at least one form of sea monster reported in their mythological history. Ketus. In Greek mythology, it is common for a sea monster to be referred to as Ketus. This term is fairly vague. Based on the context clues, however, it seems likely that Ketus was some sort of serpent/dragon, shark, whale, or fish. The most famous instance of Ketus being used is when Poseidon sent Ketus to devour Andromeda. This was done to punish Andromeda's mother for making a boast that her daughter was more beautiful than all of the Nereids, other creatures of the sea, one of which was Poseidon's wife. Andromeda was saved at the last minute by Perseus, but it is noted that he was only able to overcome Ketus by using Medusa's head. Kharibdis. There was also a Greek monster called Kharibdis who terrorized sailors and warriors when they tried to pass through the Strait of Messina. It is said that Kharibdis lived under a small rock on one side of the Messina Channel. She is thought to have been the daughter of Poseidon and Gaia, who was turned into a terrible monster by Zeus. Part of his curse was to make her thirst for the sea so much that she had to swallow large quantities of water 3 times each day. This process indirectly caused whirlpools that are estimated to have been nearly 75 feet across. She was chained underneath a rock on the strait that made it impossible to move from her location. The Cairene Croin. In Scotland, a terrifying creature known as the Cairene Croin loved to terrify its victims before consuming them in one bite. The creature has a typical water dragon or serpent shape that is vicious and terrifying, but it uses its ability to shapeshift to turn into a seemingly harmless fish. When in this form, it is no bigger than the palm of a human hand. When fishermen caught the Cairene Croin in its small fish form, it would suddenly transform back into its original terrifying state and swallow the fisherman whole. Grindylows. Grindylows are water demons that appear to us from British folklore. They are supposedly most common in the county of Yorkshire. Grindylows were water demons that liked to wait in cold water for a victim to happen by, usually a child. When a child ventured into cold water, the Grindylow would pull them into the water with long fingers and drown them. It is thought that the Grindylow was invented to keep children from wandering off into dangerous waters. The Kappa. The Kappa is a water imp that was known to inhabit bodies of water in Japan. This terrible creature was known to have a humanoid body with superhuman strength and terrifying speed. They were known to wait by the edges of water and sometimes in bathroom toilets for victims to come by. At this time, they would pull their victims into the water and drown them in order to steal their shiri, a person's life force. It was thought that the only way to survive a Kappa attack was to take advantage of their oddly polite behavior and incredible honesty. If one saw a Kappa, they should bow out of respect. The Kappa would do the same because it was obsessed with politeness and would spill the water out of the cup in its head. This water was the source of all a Kappa's power. Without it, it is powerless. The Kraken. The Kraken is an infamous sea monster who was known to terrorize sailors off the coast of Norway. This enormous beast was thought to release a substance made up of its previous meals into the water when it wanted to feed. This would cause an impressive amount of fish to flock to the area in order to feed on the bait. When enough fish had gathered, the Kraken would reach up and swallow them all, then fall into a deep sleep while it digested the food. When sailors first realized that fish were drawn to a particular area at certain times when the Kraken was feeding, they would attempt to sail overhead and drop their nets to skim off the Kraken's food source. This greatly upset the Kraken, causing it to sink the ships and eat the sailors. Whenever a ship tried to steal food from the beast, or bothered it in general, the Kraken would create a terrible whirlpool and raise its tentacles out of the water to capsize the vessel in question. Leviathan. One of the most famous sea monsters was brought to the forefront by Christianity. This monster is Leviathan, one of the first creatures to be created by Yahweh. Leviathan started out as a gentle creature that was content to roam the seas with its partner. Soon, however, it was corrupted and became a creature that loved to cause chaos and destruction. In order to save the world, Yahweh was forced to destroy the female Leviathan so that they could not reproduce. The male Leviathan was left for the time to roam the oceans and cause mayhem. He was known to have many dragon-like abilities and to be impossible to kill. This combination made him the most feared monster in history. He was known to cause delight in causing the waters around him to boil at intense temperatures, causing the skin of sailors to melt slowly and painfully. It was thought that to see the Leviathan was to be fated for death. There are no reports of Leviathan being spotted by someone who survived to tell the tale. Sirens. Although beautiful in appearance, sirens are some of the most feared sea monsters because of their mischievous nature. There were two forms of sirens. The first was a woman with the arms and legs of a bird and a beautiful human face. The second was a woman with a fishtail who was also very beautiful. These creatures were known to swim or fly by ships that had been at sea for a considerable amount of time. They preyed on men's need for companionship and the considerable time they'd spent without a woman's touch. The sirens would sing songs that were so beautiful, men would decide to climb out of the ship and jump into the water to be with the lovely maiden. When they reached the water, however, a terrible surprise awaited them. The sirens would drag them off to a remote place or the depths of the sea and feast on their flesh. Skyla. Amphitrite decided to poison the water of the spring where Skyla loved to bathe, turning her into a terrible monster. There are several different renditions of what Skyla was turned into. Some of these renditions say she remained a beautiful maiden from the waist up, but had a terrible serpent's tail and 6 dog heads around her waist that hungrily sought out men to devour as part of her vengeance. Other accounts say she was made to be a fearsome monster above the waist as well. She was truly terrifying to crews attempting to pass through the Strait of Messina. She lived directly across from a whirlpool monster called Kharibdis, and sailors would have to choose which monster they wanted to take their chances with. Though many chose to pass on her side of the strait, they had to sacrifice 6 men to her hungry mouths to do so. Umibozu. Perhaps the most terrifying sea monster in Japanese mythology is the terrible Umibozu. When sailing along a calm sea on a day with good weather, Umibozu would suddenly cause a storm to come out of nowhere and create waves that rocked ships and terrified the passengers. Then he would rise from the sea, a black humanoid figure with hollow eyes and an eerie smile. Should anyone speak to the monster or offend it in any way, the Umibozu would capsize the ship and claim the souls of the sailors.